It's a new year and we have more broken devices to fix. I have an OLED switch, so it charges normally, but it does not turn on. Now the customer told me that this switch dropped on the ground and ceased to charge. So I'm gonna get this down to the motherboard. We're gonna go to our brand new microscope and chase that fix. So what I've been seeing with these OLED switches is typically the APU will have bad solder joints or broken connections underneath the APU. So the approach that we're going to take with this, especially because the customer said that they dropped it, is we're going to remove the APU, we're going to reball it and see if there's any broken solder joints underneath and put the chip back on. That typically does fix the no power issue. Let's hope it's just broken solder connections and not actually pulled pads. Even though we can fix the pulled pads, they're just very tedious to fix. We're getting this shield up here. There we go. Got that little shield off here, and now we got our APU. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove all of this old thermal paste. Just don't want it to interfere with us removing the chip and reballing the chip. A lot of the time what I like to do is I like to get a brush dipped in alcohol to clean these capacitors. Just kind of, the bristles just kind of get in between them, and we can go ahead and just kind of clean that up there. Usually cleans up pretty nice. Okay, there we go. So we're going to apply some tape through this top side here. Oh, we're good. This is going to be fun. Well, I'm going to apply flux. Once you start seeing the flux flow, you know that you're good to go. When it's ready, I like to try to touch the chip. It's probably not ready yet. Yeah, the APU is starting to float here. All right. APU is just about ready to come up. Put a tweezer under it. Boom. There we go. Here's our APU. Set it off to the side. Let's take a look at our board here. Okay, so it is probably bad solder joints. It probably had cracked solder joints. The console was probably on when it happened. We will go ahead and clean the solder off the chip, reball it, and put it back on. All right, so we're going to add flux here first, and that is going to help our solder to flow. We got another call. So first things first, we're going to take the iron and we're going to add some leaded solder to it. We're going to just do our best to capture all of the lead-free solder and kind of mix the two to lower the melting temperature. So when we wick these pads, they're just going to wick real nice and easy. Okay, perfect. And we can go ahead and start wicking these pads. We still have a little bit of life left in this wick, so we're going to go ahead and use it. Get this last edge here. Now we're good to take a Q-tip and we're going to clean up all of the old residual flux. Okay, our board is like buttery smooth now. We are good to go. So the board is ready and prepped for the chip install. All we need to do is reball the chip and we can slap it back on here and should be good to go. Thankfully, I don't see any obvious cracked solder joints or any solder pads. Usually, at least with the OLED that I see, you usually either have cracked solder joints or broken pads underneath the APU. And basically, we don't have any of those. So let's go ahead and reball the chip. Now I just have to pick through which one is the Nintendo Switch APU stencil. Okay, here it is. If you haven't picked one of these up, it's the AMAOE stencils, and they work amazing for PS5 Southbridge, PS5 SSD controller, Nintendo Switch APU. I mean, they're insane for reballing. If you're a shop or a hobbyist that does reballing or micro soldering repair, definitely got to pick up a good stencil. Okay, so first things first, we're going to go ahead and put some flux down, if it will go down, on this chip. We're going to go ahead and flow some solder. Collect all of the solder from, we're basically just trying to mix lead and lead-free solder so that the melting temperature will be lowered considerably when we go to wick them, and it'll wick easier too. All right, perfect. All right, let's do this. Dude, I love this wick. It is amazing. It works perfectly every single time. Right. Okay, now that the chip is wicked clean, we can go ahead and clean it. It's so nice and satisfying to clean off all the flux off of the chip after you're done wicking it away. It just looks so nice. Boom, this chip is smooth and ready for a reball. Okay, now we have the APU under a stencil. Now we need some solder paste. First, I'm going to put some solder paste down on a paper towel. This paste is pretty wet. We actually want to dry it out as much as possible because this paste will react better to heat. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to scoop up a lot of my dry paste, and it's still kind of wet, to be honest, but it's better than what it was. We're going to go ahead and start spreading this paste onto our APU. Want to make sure that we get it basically all the paste spread into all of the holes equally as much as possible. All right, now that we have repasted the entire thing, paste is in all of the holes, I'm going to take one singular Q-tip with isopropyl alcohol on it, and I'm going to just wipe this chip. It's going to help that paste kind of stay in each of the holes here. We have a perfectly pasted chip. Now we can start with the heating process and reball this chip. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put a pair of tweezers on the outside of this stencil, because when I heat this stencil directly, it's going to warp slightly. All right. Boom. We're starting to get balls here. That's fantastic. They're flowing nice and quick. Boom. Now we wait for them to solidify. All right. Now that we let them solidify, what I like to do is put down a razor blade, and we're going to go ahead and slowly go like this and just kind of basically level out all the solder balls. So we have perfectly equal solder balls all the way through. That some of them actually needed leveling. Some of them did not, but some of them did. That way we know that we have perfect balls and we're good to go. We're going to go ahead and remove our stencil, and it came off perfectly. We're going to go ahead and do a final reflow. Make sure that these balls all solidify. Just want to flow it. There we go. You can kind of see all the balls are perfectly flowed now. I'll go ahead and show you guys. Look at that. Perfect balls, man. All the way through and through. Perfect, perfect. All right, let's install this chip onto our board. I'm going to put some flux down here in the center, and I'm going to go ahead and rub it in. Line up our triangle with this triangle. Do our absolute best to get the chip as centered on the area as we can. Put a little bit of flux down on this side and just let it flow under the chip. Now this chip should flow into place a lot quicker than it came off because we have leaded solder balls. Leaded solder does flow at a much lower temperature, and so we should be good to go. See a little jiggle test. That way we know with surface tension that the chip is good to go. Our chip has now flowed back into place, and now the phone is ringing, and we will test it in just a moment. We'll let it cool down. All right, so I got the board back in the console. Let's go ahead and plug in the battery. I have not seen if this works yet. I'm really hoping it does, but when it comes to drop failures, you never know what exactly the problem is. You just hope for the best. In my experience, it's typically the APU. So let's find out. Is it gonna work? Nintendo. We got Nintendo logo. Okay, do we have the Nintendo Switch logo? Yes, Nintendo. Do we get to the regular screen? And we do. We got it. APU Reball successful. Thank you for your contributions. Contributions, Frankie.
Yeah, I'm trying. I was trying to be PG.
Yeah.
Not PG-13.
Yes. Yeah. So it's working. We got it. It ended up being the APU, which my experience typically is. So either cracked solder joints or broken pads underneath the chip. If you like this video, subscribe.